What's up, fellow nerds? I'm JD. This is Malta 5, where the jank will set you free. And today we're playing a really fun deck called Feather Heroic. And I believe Feather is a pretty good deck in Standard, which is not really my thing. That's more of Rob's world on this channel. But I'm bringing Feather into Modern to see if we can make Heroic work here. And I mean, a lot of people will say, it's just a worse version of Infect, or it's a worse version of Bogles. Why don't you play that? And you know what? Maybe they're right. But that's not what we're here for on this channel. We're here to have fun and play jank. So, Feather Heroic in Modern. We're going to make it work. So, the namesake card, Feather. 3/4 flyer for 3, which is already solid. Like 3 power in the air is a great beater. 4 toughness is awesome. Dodges lightning bolt and can block a lot of stuff. But that's not the important part. The important part is the rest of the text box. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile it and it returns to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So with Feather, we are recycling all our spells that are targeting our heroic creatures, which kind of minimizes one of the downsides to a heroic deck, which is the risk of getting 2-for-1'd. If you go to target a creature with a spell and your opponent removes that creature in response, then you just lost your creature and the spell you cast to target it just fizzles, so you lost that too. So Feather kind of helps to combat that downside, which is getting 2-for-1 with some more card advantage value reusing cards. Along the same lines, another value engine in this deck is the Hoard Arcanist. Interesting stats. It's a 1/3 trample for 2. I mean, 3 toughness is nice. Trample's pretty irrelevant. It's never going to be more than 1 or 2 power, so we're not trampling over for much. But again, the rest of the text box is great. Whenever he attacks, not deals damage, just attacks. You just got to turn him sideways in the attack step, and he will trigger. You can cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to his power from your graveyard without paying his mana cost. So anytime he turns sideways, you get a free spell from your graveyard. And every single instant or sorcery in our main board is 1 converted mana cost. So we can cast any of them. So again, reusing spells, getting that card value, card advantage. Yeah, so these 2 are great. So 4 ofs of each. And then we'll talk about the heroic creatures. First up is favored Hoplite. Whenever you target him, he gets a +1/+1 counter and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. So that's pretty amazing. You can target this guy in response to a bolt or whatever and prevent that damage. You can target him in combat and then he's just comes through unscathed. So he can attack into or block big giant creatures, and you just prevent all that damage. The other one is Laguna Ban Trailblazer. Not quite as good as favored Hoplite, but still pretty cool in its own way. It starts off with 0 power, so in order to, it's kind of slow getting going as an attacker. You got to target it at least once just to even get it to 1 power. And even then, 1 power is nothing super exciting. You got to target it twice to get it to 2 power, and then we're chipping in for at least a decent amount of damage. But the cool thing about Laguna Ban Trailblazer is the 4 toughness as a 1-drop. This acts as such a good blocker. There are very few creatures in Modern that you see super often with more than 3 power. So this blocks a lot of stuff. And again, as you target it and it grows bigger, it blocks even more stuff. So maybe not the most aggressive creature, but a great blocker. So it can kind of help us stabilize. So we've got our aggressive one and we've got our defensive one. So those are our 2 heroic creatures. The last creature is 2 Giver of Runes. Again, we don't have a ton of targets for these heroic spells, so protecting them is very important, and that's where Giver comes in. It's a solid turn 1 or turn 2 play. If you expect a lot of removal, maybe turn 1. If you're not as worried, you could play it turn 2. But if you've got one on the board that sticks, it kind of allows you to drop a feather on turn 3 without too much worry. So then you can tap this in response and protect your feather. And that's who you really want to protect. So, otherwise you might want to wait till turn 4 to cast feather so you can protect it with a God's Willing or something. So getting Giver out there turns 1 or 2 allows you to drop feather on turn 3 without fear. But it's not a heroic target, so I only have a couple of them. But definitely a useful creature. Going down the protection route is God's Willing. And this pulls double duty. This can, again, protect your creature in case of, being targeted by a removal spell of some sort. It also works offensively because protection means creature can't be blocked by that color. So if you're up against Merfolk and you name protection from blue, you can just blow right past those guys, all the blue creatures, and they can't block you. So this card basically reads gains protection from the color of your choice and can't be blocked. And then there's a Scry 1 tacked on, which is helpful in this deck because there's 2 distinct halves of the deck. 3. You got lands, you got heroic targets, and then you get the heroic spells. And so the Scry is helpful to get rid of the half of the deck, or the third of the deck that you don't need, and dig to what you do need. If you've got a board full of creatures and nothing to target them with, you want a targeting spell. If you've got a handful of spells but no creatures, you obviously want to dig for a creature. So the Scry is nice. We've got a 1 of Coordinated Assault. Because it can target up to 2 creatures, which is kind of cool. If you have multiple heroic creatures on the battlefield, triggering 2 of them is nice. A +1 power boost and first strike makes for some fun combat tricks. We have 4 Expedites, which cantrips. You draw a card off of it, and it grants haste. So this is nice. Say on turn 3, you can drop a Dreadhorde Arcanist and then expedite him, and then he can attack immediately and recycle something from the graveyard. You can even do tricky things like cast it on a Summoning Sick Giver of Runes, and then all of a sudden, opponent thought shields were down, but now this Giver can tap and protect something else. So you can do some tricky things with Expedite, and the cantripping is great. Again, keep up that card value. A similar card is Defiant Strike. Again, this one cantrips. It just grants +1 to the power, which isn't anything super exciting, but it targets and it draws us a card. So it's a 4 of for sure. We've got Bolt in the deck as a 1 mana removal spell, can go to the face to close things off. Dreadhorde Arcanist can recycle it. If you're in a pinch, you can even pull some interesting moves like bolting. You can bolt either of our heroic creatures safely. Favored Hoplite, when he gets targets, you prevent all damage, so the bolt doesn't hurt him, but he gets the counter. And Laguna Ban Trailblazer has 4 toughness, so you can bolt this as well. So if you want to trigger heroic, maybe you have a feather out, so you bolt your own creatures, and then the bolt will come back to your hand again to use on your opponents. So there's some tricks you can do with bolt. Reckless Rage is our other removal spell. This one feels bad against control or very creature-light decks because it requires an opposing creature to target to even be able to use it. But against creature-based decks, it is very good. 4 damage is great. You can kill a lot of stuff with 4 damage. And it's also targets your creatures. And again, both of our heroic creatures, actually all of our creatures, can survive 2 damage. So it can target any of ours safely, and we do not care. That's why, some people use like Satyr Hoplite or what's the other one? No, they're not favored. The other, the red heroic creature that creates 1/1 tokens. I forget. Either way, they only have 1 toughness though. So if you target them with this, they do not survive. They get a counter and go to 2 toughness and then just die. So that's why we chose the heroic creatures that I did and did not choose those ones. So Reckless Rage pulls double duty, targets your own stuff, kills your opponent's stuff. Pretty good card in this deck. But again, we're going to side it out against control if they don't have creatures, because then it's kind of just a dead card in hand. Mutagenic Growth. We have a very light splash of green, just so we can cast this without paying the 2 life. We could fetch up a Singleton Temple Garden, but otherwise we're paying the 2 life and casting this for free. It just kind of speeds up the deck a little bit. Again, if we're tapped out, the opponent thinks maybe shields are down, there's no tricks, and then we can cast Mutagenic Growth for free and blow them out. So we've got 3 of those. Excuse me. That's it. I think that's all the cards. Mana base, pretty straightforward. 4 fetches, 4 Inspiring Vantage, some basics, couple red Sacred Foundries, and like I said, Singleton Temple Garden, and then Sunbaked Canyon. Again, just kind of keeps digging. If we're flooding out, we can sack this to draw a card and keep blowing through our deck. Whew. So anyway, that's the main deck. Lots to talk about there. It's just a cool deck. Lots of synergies. It's a lot of fun. Sideboard real quick. Talk about this. Singleton Wear and Tear. Just a good all-around card. Hits artifacts or enchantments or both. Now, Graveyard Hate. We need our graveyard intact for the Dreadhorde Arcanist. So we're in white, so you would think, oh, Rest in Peace is great. Why don't you run that? But that gets rid of our own graveyard, which we don't want, because then that turns off the value of a Dreadhorde Arcanist. So instead, I went with 2 Tormod's Crypts and Singleton Wheel of Sun and Moon, which is kind of like a one-sided Rest in Peace. So that's our Graveyard Hate package. Along with Wear and Tear, we have Stony Silence for Artifact Hate. Couple Path to Exiles as additional removal for creature-heavy decks. Path is not as great as the Reckless Rage or the Bolt because you cannot use it to target our own creatures and get value. But, sometimes it's just necessary. You're either up against like a Dredge deck or a deck with creatures with toughness greater than 4 or 5, and you need to get rid of them with a Path instead. So we get the paths there. A Singleton Celestial Flare. This is good against Infect and Bogles. You could maybe come in against... I guess those are the 2 big ones. I got blown out. I got beat twice by Bogles in my last video, so maybe I'm just a little salty. So I probably won't see it again, but the Celestial's Flare is there for revenge, just in case. 2 Blood Moons because we can. This comes in against, like Soul Herder, Bant Soul Herder decks, Jund decks, anything that's color intensive. We can kind of mess with their mana. Tron. And then 4 Boros Charms. I mentioned how the control deck, Reckless Rage, is just a dead card. So we take all those out and bring in the Boros Charms instead. And this can do a few things. It's versatile, which is nice. It can deal 4 damage to them or to a Planeswalker, one of their Planeswalkers, which is nice. So it's Planeswalker removal, it's extra reach to close them off, or permanents you control gain indestructible. So we can do this in response to a sweeper. Unfortunately, it doesn't work against like Settle the Wreckage or the Miracle Terminus, whatever. But against any of the damage dealing sweepers that say destroy or whatever. This will save our board. And finally, it can target our heroic creatures and give them double strike, which is what we want. So 3 relevant modes. And that's everything. Feather Heroic and Modern. Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. It's a fun deck. So we're going to take this through a league, see how we do. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't and you like the janky content we put out on this channel. We would really appreciate it. I'll see you in the first match. Thank you for watching.